Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of 18NTC. That's the 2018 Nonprofit Technology Conference. We're coming to you from the Convention Center in New Orleans, Louisiana. My guest now is Rachel Clemens. She is Chief Marketing Officer at Mighty Citizen. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And this interview, as all our NTC interviews are, is sponsored by Network for Good. Easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. Rachel, your workshop topic is Anatomy of a Nonprofit Website While Your Donors Aren't Giving More Online.
Right.
What's wrong with websites?
Well, there's a few things.
We have plenty of time together,
I know.
so just summarize and then
there's
we'll go
a few
into
things we
detail.
can look at,
Okay.
but typically we aren't always giving people a reason to care. We aren't always creating a great user experience for our users, and then our forms are not always optimized to make people actually fill them out.
That was very concise.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
your seminar description says, quote, "Your website is holding you back," end quote. Okay, all right, so let's flesh these things out. Donors are getting confused? Good chance?
Yeah, I mean,
You talk about donor confusion.
yeah, some of us are doing this better than others, but essentially a good website is a website where the donor visits or the user visits and they know exactly what's expected of them. So I land on the page and I know what you want me to do. You want me to donate, you want me to sign up to volunteer, you want me to take a petition. It's very clear what I should be doing. We're not always making that really clear for our users. We're giving them too many options. We're giving them too much content they don't really care about. There's lots of things that we're doing that are keeping our users from doing the thing that we really actually want them to do.
Okay. But we have a lot of important things that we need to tell them. There's a lot going on in our nonprofit.
Yep.
I mean, we're here for a substantial reason. You're going to hold me back from conveying all the important work that I'm doing?
No, I'm just saying that you should take the place to say those things and spread them throughout the site. So, for example, let's take your homepage. Your organization has a number one driving goal, whether that goal is to raise money or get additional volunteers or whatever the goal may be. That's the number one goal for the entire website. So you want to make sure that that's your call to action throughout the site. So when I land on your homepage, whatever that main goal is, I want to know about it. I want to know why I should care, what you do.
We're burying the lead?
We're burying the lead. We're just not making it really obvious. And despite our best efforts, we know what we do day in and day out, but our users don't always know. People come to you because they heard about you or they followed a Google search. They don't necessarily know everything about you before they land on your site. So when they land on your homepage...
They're there for more information.
Exactly. Well, they want to know why you exist, what impact you're making in the world, and what they're supposed to do next. Okay. So are they supposed to donate, sign up for your newsletter?
How are we going to figure out what we're doing wrong on our specifics on our site?
Yeah, so the first place to start is a content audit. I always recommend people do a 10-second test. That's sort of the first thing. So you look at your website and you say, okay, does it pass the 10-second test? Take 10 seconds, ask a few other people that don't know really anything about you, and ask them to answer these questions in 10 seconds. Why you exist, what impact you're making in the world, and what I'm supposed to do next. If they can answer those questions in 10 seconds, then your site is setting them up for success. If they can't, then something's wrong.
Only 10 seconds on the site? They should be able to answer those
10
three
seconds.
questions?
The average attention span is about 8 seconds. So I might be a little bit generous with the 10 seconds.
All right. Thanks so much for the extra.
2 seconds.
25%. Yeah.
It matters.
Okay, that seems like a very stringent test. All right, if we fail, which seems likely, how do we start?
How do you fix it?
How do we, yeah, exactly.
So to go back, I'll follow up on that. I mentioned a content audit, and that's really the best place to start. And what you'll do is you'll take each page of your site, you'll make a spreadsheet, essentially.
Okay, start with a spreadsheet.
Go to the spreadsheet,
Yes.
List each page of your site, list what the purpose of that page is, and then list what the call to action should be. So, for example...
Every page should have a call to action?
Every page should have some... It's
it
not
might even just be go to another page.
Exactly.
Right?
It could be learn more.
Yeah.
So say you're a nonprofit that puts on events. You're going to have your individual event page. The purpose of that page is to let people know what they're going to get out of that event. And then your goal is to drive them to sign up. So for that one specifically, your goal is a sign-up form. But there may be other pages, like if you're on the main events pages, I just want you to learn about all the different events that are available to you. There's no form, I need you to dive deeper. So the goal of each page can vary. Some of them are going to be very direct and have forms, and some of them are going to be like, learn more about this particular topic or this particular program. But if you go back to the content audit, then that'll give you a method to look at each page of your site and determine if that page is doing its job.
What's the goal? And what's the call to action?
What's the
page?
purpose of the page?
Purpose.
And what is what do you want the user to do? What's the desired behavior?
Okay. What do I do with this lengthy spreadsheet? Because it's a decent sized website.
Oh, it'll be big. Yep.
It could easily be 100 rows.
Yep.
All right, so what am I going to do with this now?
So then once you have that information,
This is my audit, or this is the first step of my audit?
This is your audit. So you've now audited every page.
Yeah. I'm looking at it.
Yeah,
so
you're looking at it.
I'm already done with step number 1.
Yeah, you got the audit done.
Okay.
Keep in mind, too, because it can be big.
it
So
could be many hundreds
you can
of rows,
prioritize sections of your site. Like if you need to chunk it up in order to make it palatable, then you can do that and just start with different sections.
All right, thank you.
So you've got your audit.
Give me permission for that.
Yes, you're off the hook a little bit. Yeah.
All right.
You've got your audit, and now you can go in and see if your site is doing those things. So if I have a current website, is my current event page, do I have a contact form on that event page? So do I have the right things in place to meet the needs of the audit I just created? If not, then you know by looking at the audit what you're missing and what needs to happen next.
Okay. How do I know if the page is meeting its goal, its purpose?
Well, you can use analytics to see if it's meeting its goal. So if you have a sign-up form, are people filling out that sign-up form on that page or from that page?
Okay.
So you know what your general conversion rate is. There's benchmarks for that too that you can look up and see if you're hitting benchmarks.
Wait, but that's the call to action for the page.
Or
So what's the goal? How do I know if the page is meeting
if it's meeting the purpose.
Yeah,
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, if the purpose is to get them to learn more about the event, or basically you're lining up what the purpose is with the content that's available. So you can use user groups if you want to get more formal about it, or oftentimes you just sort of know, or your program leads know, if the page is meeting the goal. Yeah.
All right. So read it, scrutinize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This doesn't. The purpose of this page is one thing, but it doesn't really. Yeah. What I'm reading doesn't line up.
Yeah, and we all have natural bias.
Yeah.
So sometimes getting outside opinions can help with that too. You can get more formal with user groups and focus groups and things like that.
Okay. You rolled your eyes a little bit. So
It's just.
Have to.
I think inherently we tend to know.
Yeah.
Your gut is often right when you're analyzing your own content.
Okay. All right. So you're going through page by page now. This could be a bit of a process.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then you're tweaking as needed.
Yeah.
Based on purpose and goal.
As you go. Yep.
Purpose and call to action. Okay. You talk a little about cognitive load.
Yeah.
You mentioned cognitive load in your description. What is that about?
Cognitive load is when you land on a site and you're not quite sure what to do next. So it's an overabundance of content and options. Ideally, when you land on a site, and it doesn't matter which page you land on, most people don't land on the homepage.
Yeah, they're coming from some outside link that
exactly.
directed them to direct the specific content that they want.
Mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm. So when you land there, you should know what you're doing, like what you're supposed to do when you land on that page. It should be very clear. But a lot of the times what happens is you give me too many options. You'll give me, call outs to this event, this fundraising event we've got coming up, and a call out to sign up for our summer camp programs. You're giving me too many options, and it's creating what we call cognitive load, which is an overload of information in your brain.
Okay. The user flow, how do we know how people are flowing through our site?
Yeah, so you can use analytics to actually see a physical flow, like a visual flow. When we think about user flow through a website, we think about the user journey. And so if you're familiar with the marketing funnel, you've got people who are kind of aware of you and they move through the cycle to purchase, typically, if you're thinking about an e-commerce model. On the nonprofit side, your users, they first, they're aware of you and then they have interest. And so that's like, what can they do on your site to kind of raise their hand and make themselves known? Yeah. So a lot of times that's signing up for a newsletter or it's signing a petition. So you want to make sure on your website you're giving them little things they can do to kind of raise their hand and say, I'm here, but not like make a big commitment. So you want to make sure on your site you've got places for those interested parties to do that, to raise their hands.
Stuff like
You
that.
then want to think about moving them into consideration. So now they raise their hands. How do you keep touching them to remind them that you're there and that you're doing good work? So this looks like giving them impact stories on the website, touching them with monthly newsletters. If you're still doing a printed newsletter, it could include that as well. And then you want to get them into the involvement stage. So you've been, kind of interacting with them for a little bit, but now you want to get them to donate. So making sure there's places where you're actually asking for money. If you have a membership association, you might be asking them to become a member, or volunteering could be your number one priority. Mm-hmm. So you get them to the involvement stage, and then once they're there, you want to move them to advocacy. How do you get them to share your content, to campaign for you, to do peer-to-peer fundraising? So if you think about a funnel, that shape, you've got more people who are in the interested phase, and you move them through the cycle. And your website should give them opportunities to move through that cycle.
Okay. And you just identified a whole bunch of goals of different pages through your site.
Yep.
From advocacy to donation, from just get a little engaged. Maybe you could, in engagement, when you're sort of in the informing stage, maybe you could add a SMS.
Yeah. Little touches.
Ask or something, or sign up for SMS.
Yeah, the SMS one is tricky because people get real particular about their phone numbers and texting, and so it's like they're willing to give you their email address much more frequently than they're willing to give you their phone numbers. Certainly something that's worth testing, especially if you've got a younger demographic. They don't think as much about it as the rest of us do.
Okay. Now, because I've had 2 panels today on SMS.
Oh yeah.
So let's not negate the whole hour of content and say.
Oh, certainly not. No.
It only applies to people 30 and under. No. It doesn't.
Yeah.
But no, it's worth testing.
Yeah.
And see how your constituency reacts.
I mean, every nonprofit knows their donors best and their audience is best. So if you're seeing people interact through text and chatting and all kinds of stuff, then certainly giving those things a shot is worth it.
Yeah. Okay. You want to meet them where they are.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
where you want them to be.
Exactly.
Okay. You talk about clear hero messages. Mm-hmm. What's a hero message?
So a hero message is when you land on a site, it's that little piece of content that gives you an indication of an organization's why. So for example, in my presentation, I used Boys and Girls Club of Metro Atlanta, and their why message is great futures start here. That's a great hero message. It's inspiring. It gives me an idea of what they do. It shows it with a kid, a picture of a kid who's probably in high school. And so it gives me some immediate indication of what they do and why they matter without really knowing too much about them, potentially. Yeah. So the hero message is that little nugget that gets people kind of inspired and gives them some clue as to your mission without kind of, having to be overt about it.
Okay. Talk me through some more stuff about website trouble. We have plenty of time together.
Oh boy!
What else did you talk about in your session?
We talked about our donation forms and how a lot of times we're making them too complicated.
Okay. What are the symptoms of a complicated donation page?
Yeah. So a lot of times people want to ask additional segmentation questions so that they can better target their marketing later, and there's value in that. But one option for potentially simplifying your form is to move those segmentation questions and try to get them in other places. So one of the things we talked about was not asking segmentation questions in your donation form, but asking them on your thank you page. So a user feels really good when they've just given to you. Yes. They get a thank you page. That thank you page should further that good feeling. A lot of times right now, nonprofits they're using them as exit forms, exit pages. It'll say like, thanks for your donation. Look in your inbox for a receipt. But really, your thank you page could be so much more. It can drive them to other content, help them to see how their donation's making an impact, help them watch videos. It can also be a source for asking segmentation questions because they feel great right at that moment, and they're more willing to answer 2 or 3 kind of questions. Okay. So getting segmentation questions off the donation form, to the thank you page.
Okay.
We also talked about nudges, so how you can use little subtle...
It's a very technical term, but define that, otherwise you'll be in jargon jail.
I like that, jargon jail.
Yes,
do not want to be in jargon jail.
No.
Nudges are little either visual or textual clues you can use to get people to do a certain behavior. So an example of that is we showcase the Salvation Army USA website. When you land on their donation page, they've got a pre-selected amount for the dollar amount of the gift. So they'll pre-select $50. That's a nudge. They're actually saying you should give $50. They're not overtly saying it, but that's an example of a nudge. Another one is from Planned Parenthood. They also designate a certain dollar amount. They designate $35. So they pre-select $35. They pre-select monthly versus one time. And they add a textual nudge that says, most of our donors are giving $35 monthly right now. Please give what you can. So it's like they're really nudging.
But then they qualify it. Please give what you can.
Exactly.
Right.
They got to soften it up.
And there are other choices.
Yeah.
But pre-selected is whatever, the 35
exactly.
monthly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So testing has shown that this can work really well. Again, it's just sort of situational, so you want to do your own testing to back it up. But my gut says that Planned Parenthood, their donation amount, their probably average donation amount is about 25. Because they're choosing 35, you figure that's a nudge up.
Okay.
So.
Okay. What else? Anything else around the donation page?
Oh, let's see.
Declutter it. Move it to
Declutter.
the thank you.
Get rid of your navigation on your
the
thank you
nudges,
page. That's another one.
Navigation? What do you mean?
Yep. So if you hit the donate button on a home page and you go to the donate page, I don't want to see any other options. Get rid of your navigation. So Salvation Army
I can't
does.
Go back?
You can hit
use
your
my
back
browser
button.
window.
Yeah, you know how to go back.
My browser back. Okay, but don't
Yeah,
give them the
I'm not
option.
gonna. Once you land here, I'm not gonna let you go
And all the
anywhere
other
else.
content, any pull-down menus, they don't belong.
Yeah, they don't belong because basically when your donor hits donate, they're kind of saying, "I'm getting ready to donate to you."
right.
So let them
Why
do that
distract
one
them?
thing.
Don't give
Don't
them the
distract
distraction.
them.
Okay.
Make it very simple and
These are
clean.
great tips. Okay.
Yeah, good. Let's see what else I've got. Oh, I think a lot of nonprofits require phone numbers. So actually, if you're doing texting, this might make sense for your organization. But a lot of times they'll require a phone number, and a lot of users just don't want to give up their phone numbers. So making that a non-required field, unless you have very particular reasons you're doing it, and if so, that's okay. But if you're asking it because it's kind of one of those contact points you want, but you don't actually do anything with it, then get rid of it. Don't ask for it. It can be a blocker.
Okay.
One of the other things we talked about was donation forms that are multi-step. So if you have a long donation form page and the user abandons the page, you don't have good data about if they abandoned at the top of the page, at the bottom of the page, if they abandoned somewhere in the middle, if it was a certain question they got hung up on. You just know they didn't fill out the form. Mm-hmm. If you break your donation step or form down into steps,
then you can look at the analytics.
then you can track it much
different
easier.
pages?
Yeah,
Is
of different steps, right?
Well, is each step a page?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
I mean, thinking of, we point to Charity Water as an example of one that does this. So you click the donate button, a little, it's basically like a little modal window pops up. It feels real bite-sized, real palatable. It's very small and easy. Feels very e-commerce-y. So you fill out the first step is your contact information. And then the next step is your payment information. So even if they don't get the payment information, if for some reason you drop off, they have your contact information. So they can still, add you to the list and communicate with you, even if they don't get the payment. And then they can also track it.
Very smart.
Yeah, and know, and fix the payment problem.
Right, so you can look at the analytics and see where people are dropping out.
Yeah.
Where we're losing. What's the technical term for that?
Yeah.
Is there one?
Abandonment, probably is what I would call it. Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing it'll do is let you. It lets your users find errors a little bit easier. So instead of a long form and you made an error somewhere and you got to go back and figure out where you made the error, the little bite size makes it a little bit easier to do that as well.
Okay.
Yep.
We still got more. Don't hold out on us.
Okay.
Don't hold out on Nonprofit
Oh,
Radio,
let's
please.
see. Let's see.
Oh, we had. Okay, I'll help you out. You mentioned quick website fixes.
Yeah.
Is that where we are now?
That's sort of where we are.
Okay.
Making the thank you page work for you,
Yeah.
not requiring your phone number.
Right.
I'm trying to think of what else is in there. We've kind of gone over a lot of them, making things easy, simplifying your forms, things like that. One thing that we talked about in the strategy, so the presentation is about the anatomy of a nonprofit website. So we sort of broke it up into 3 parts. The first part is you're using your brain to launch a strategy and make decisions around the website and the goals. The second one is making them care through the heart, and we talked about hero messages. And then the last one was really the nuts and bolts of keeping things moving, and that's all the little iterations you can make. But to go back to the strategy, there's a lot of things that we want our nonprofits to be thinking about in the strategy phase. Actually, you should spend way more time in the strategy phase than any of the other phases, because that means you're setting the site up for success. So, for example, we always tell our clients, when you engage with us as an agency, we're going to come in and we're going to help you think through the strategy. But if you've gone through some of that yourselves as a team first, that's going to get you much further down the road and help us be more efficient in working together. So that means not only identifying the goals for the site, but also identifying who has to have buy-in. So typically we know our executive team needs to have some buy-in on the website. Typically the communications team runs it. The development team needs to be bought in. Programs will often need to have some sort of say. So you want to think early on about who are the people that are going to pop up halfway through this project and start asking me questions. Yeah, and start making requests. You want to get them in early and make them part of the decision-making process for the goals, so that when you document that and 3 months from now someone asks, well, why isn't this on the homepage? You could say, remember how we set those goals together and we all agreed that blah, blah, blah? Well, that's why.
Okay.
So really documenting that and tying it back to metrics, that's another piece. So a lot of times when we sit down with our clients, we'll get a list of goals. That's a pretty easy endeavor. We'll start listing goals, we'll prioritize them, and then we'll say, well, how are we going to measure this? And they don't necessarily have systems in place to measure it very well. So you want to be thinking about what technology you can use to actually get metrics early on in the project. So, for example, if you're in a nonprofit that has members as part of your membership, so say you're a YMCA, you have your CMS on your website and you have your membership database, whatever that may be, your MMS. Those two systems don't necessarily talk to each other. So you might be able to track right now, okay, this many people moved to our membership form, but you can't track how many people actually became members because it's a different system. So you want to identify those needs early so that you can solve that problem early and make sure it's solvable before you get down into development 6 months from now and realize that we can actually track these.
That reminds me of what you had just said earlier about thinking about who's going to ask questions halfway through and getting them involved in early.
Yeah.
So, in your strategizing, you need to be looking forward to figure out who and what at the outset.
And, with a lot of those audience, like with your internal audiences, your programs team needs to have input on that content audit too. They need to have input on what this page is meant to do. So if it's an after-school program, what does that page need to do? Who owns it? How frequently it gets updated? There's things like that can be part of it as well that you're agreeing on earlier, just to simplify your life down the road, right? I mean, let's think ahead.
We're trying to make this as smooth as possible.
Yeah.
Not tortuous.
It's never easy, so we'll make it as easy as possible.
Okay. We still have a couple minutes left. What do you want to wrap up with in 2 minutes or so?
I think the key for nonprofits is to try to look at your site as if you're the user. So that's not always easy because we're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
But you can do small little, ask people who are your friends with that don't necessarily know a lot about your work. Get them to do that 10-second test with you,
right.
The why, the impact, the how I can take action. I would start there and see if your website's meeting that criteria. If it's not, then go ahead and start that process of a content audit. Yeah. If it is meeting that, but maybe your growth isn't what you want it to be, your donations are not increasing as much as you would like online, then go look at your donation form. So really, you're trying to figure out where the holes might be in your site and then try to fix those. As part of the process versus like just starting with something and not really knowing if it's a problem. So like looking at your analytics, talking to your users, and identifying where people are getting hung up.
Is Google Analytics still a standard?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And now they've got Google Data Studio, which if you've got somebody that's familiar with that, can make it look much more palatable and understandable by people who aren't kind of data geeks.
Okay. Say a little more about
Google Data Studio.
Data Studio.
Yeah, so your analytics basically feeds into Google Data Studio. You can also feed in your social analytics as well. It's basically a housing tool for your analytics from all different viewpoints, and it makes it visually more pleasing as well. So, it makes it easier for those who are not embedded in data to understand what they're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Google Data Studio.
Sure.
I didn't know it. Okay. Why don't we wrap it up there, Rachel. How do you
All
think?
right.
What do you
That
think?
sounds great.
Okay. And I should have said earlier, welcome back.
That's right.
2016 NTC.
That's right.
Good to
Thanks.
have you back. All right.
Thanks.
She's Rachel Clemens, and she's the Chief Marketing Officer at Mighty Citizen.
Mighty
What is
Citizen.
Mighty Citizen? What is that?
We're a branding and digital transformation agency out of Austin, Texas, and we work with nonprofits on their branding, marketing, fundraising websites.
Rachel Clemens. This interview is sponsored by Network for Good, easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. And this is Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of the 2018 Nonprofit Technology Conference. Thanks so much for being with us.